Take me back to election night 2020. You're watching the then president, and he starts talking, and you do what?
I felt absolutely sick to my stomach, physically sick to my stomach, watching him stand behind the seal of the President of the United States in the East Room of the White House, saying something that I knew at that moment he couldn't prove was true. But he was saying it as if it was an absolute fact.
We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election.
You cannot, as President of the United States, stand up there and say that the election was stolen to the American people as your first statement after the results are coming in, unless you have absolute concrete proof. And that's the prosecutor in me, I guess. I felt like it was the obligation of even someone who had been a supporter of his, had voted for him earlier that day, to say what the truth was. And the truth was that at that moment, there was no evidence that the election was being stolen. And in fact, we're now, nearly a year later, and there still isn't any evidence that the election was stolen.
And he's still saying it.
Yes.
You called that speech one of the most dangerous pieces of political rhetoric I have ever heard in my life. That's a big statement.
Well, it is a big statement, but it's true. And all you need to know to back that up is to see how many people today still believe it. Because look, one of the things that I think the president never completely took in was that his words when he became president had much greater import than they did before he became president. He didn't change an iota from the week before the election in 2016.
Lock her up is right.
To 2020.
You should lock them up.
He was the same guy. I saw him up close. I thought the presidency might change him. It did not change him a bit.
Remember, in 2016, he wanted the job himself.
I am proud to announce my candidacy for the Republican nomination for President of the United States of America.
But ultimately,
Wow, there's a lot of press.
Christie became the first of Trump's rivals to endorse him for president.
That the one person that Hillary and Bill Clinton do not want to see on that stage come next September is Donald Trump.
So people are going to be listening to you and thinking, give me a break. He was there almost from the beginning, and you're an enabler of Donald Trump. How do you respond to that?
I think people who make those kind of accusations to somebody who's trying to make the country better don't understand what politics is all about and what government's all about. Anytime I objected to the president's conduct, either from a policy or a personal perspective, I said it to him. That's the kind of relationship we have. I didn't have to hold back, and I didn't.
Do you accept any responsibility for what happened after Election Day?
Oh, responsibility? No.
As somebody who helped him along the way, you helped him get to where he was.
I don't consider myself so important that without my help, Donald Trump wouldn't have been president, wouldn't be able to do the things he did. That's ridiculous. It was clear to me he was going to be the Republican nominee, and we had a relationship. So I wanted to try to make him the best candidate he could be, and if he won, ultimately the best president he could be. I don't make any apologies for that. I was one very small part of the effort to help make him president. So the responsibility I'll take is I voted for him twice. I admit that, and I wouldn't change my vote.
Even the second time?
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't change my vote. Because so many of the things, Dana, that are happening right now in the country from a policy perspective are, to me, so long-term bad for the country.
I have to follow up on that, because looking back, the fact that democracy, in your words, was at such risk and is at such risk, isn't having a policy debate almost a luxury when what is really a problem is the Constitution itself? Meaning, don't you have to have the Constitution and democracy and the bones there in order to have the ability to have a debate about policy?
I think the two are indivisible. I don't think that you can pick one over the other. I don't think you ever should pick one over the other. And I don't think the founders would have wanted us to pick one over the other. To me, if you have a constitutional republic that is driving the constitutional republic off the road, that's just as bad. And you got to stand up against that too. You're asking me in retrospect who I would have voted for, knowing everything I know today as we're sitting here. And I'm saying to you, I could not, given what I stand for in my public life, what I've worked for in my public life, I couldn't justify a vote for Joe Biden.
You better run, cops!
That includes what happened on January 6th. Christie watched on TV as rioters stormed the U.S. Capitol and immediately tried to reach then President Trump on the phone.
So the first thing I did before I called the president was I called Kellyanne Conway. And I asked her if she had spoken to him. And she said she had tried, but she had not been able to get through. And she said, you have to call him. I tried 4 different ways that I had found successful in getting in touch with the president over the years. First, I called his secretary. She didn't pick up the phone, went right to her voicemail. Then I called his body person, and he didn't answer his phone. Then I called the White House switchboard and asked to be put through. And they said he was not available. And then I called his personal cell phone. Now, I knew that most of the time he didn't bring his cell phone down into the Oval Office, but I thought maybe he had it or maybe he was in the residence. I didn't know where he was. So I tried his cell phone and it went to voicemail. And the president and I never wound up speaking that day.
We fight like hell, and if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
Was President Trump responsible for the insurrection on the Capitol?
I don't think the speech he gave that day caused what happened. I think everything that he was saying from election night forward incited people to that level of anger.
I mean, that makes it worse. That's worse than one speech.
Well, that's my point. My point is that I think people minimize what happened on the 6th by pointing to the speech that he gave on the ellipse on the 6th.
It sounds to me like you're saying he was responsible for it.
What I'm saying is that you can never be wholly responsible for the conduct of other people. And each one of those individual people are responsible for what they did.
But would they have done that if they had not heard from their candidate, the president, that it was a bunch of, that it was rigged?
I don't think they would have gone there if they thought the election had been fair, right? If they thought the election had not been stolen, there would have been no reason for the rally.
Did Donald Trump try to stage a coup to stay in office?
I don't think so. I think, look.
How could you hear that he was trying to change election results and think of it as anything other than that?
Well, because to me, the way I view a coup is to utilize the military to try to overturn a civilian election. He wasn't doing that. He was trying to use civilian things to try to overturn an election, and he was said no to. So I don't think it certainly was not a successful coup.
What do you see it as? How would you describe it?
I see it as somebody who was desperate not to lose, and tried to exert pressure on people to do things legally that he couldn't get the courts to do.
Christie and Trump have been friends for almost 20 years, but have not spoken since January.
He called me on the way back from my Sunday morning show to tell me he didn't like what I'd said.
You'd vote to impeach?
I think that, if I think it's an impeachable offense, that's exactly what I would do, George, but I'm not in there. And we argued back and forth, as we often did. The conversation ended perfectly civilly, and that's the last time we spoke.
Do you care?
Well, sure, I care. I don't like anybody to be angry with me, but on the other hand, there's nothing that I would do differently than what I did or said if I had a chance to do it again.
You're very clear about how corrosive what he did from Election Day through right now has been. But it's not like that was the first lie that he told. It's not like that was the first time that he did something that was really damaging to democracy. So is your criticism now too little too late?
I mean, some people can make that judgment, but boy, I'll tell you, if we get off board of every politician, whoever says something that's not true, we're not going to be able to support anybody. So we could sit here and have a historical conversation about the comparison. I don't think it's useful. In the end, if your question is, oh, well, this isn't the first lie he told, therefore you're an enabler, then put me in the pantheon of people who supported a politician who didn't tell the truth 100% of the time. I got a feeling there won't be enough room in the biggest room in the world, in the Taj Mahal, to fit all of us. So again, this is from people who, in the end, don't like Donald Trump, never wanted him to be president, and now want to try to get a twofer with me. Sorry, they're not going to get it.